a quantum light theorem, my own attempt to bridge quantum mechanics with general relativity, space-time arrived immediately. There were no eons before space-time happened, because quantum light would be the energy carrier for the Big Bang, and that would have been selected by gravity instantly. So every ever emitted photon configuration in its infinite, multiversal, cyclic lifetime of the universe would be still there at the beginning of space-time, overlapped as a quantum permutational field, which again would contain every ever emitted photon configuration and its energy potential. But if only photons would be there, if only quantum light would exist, nothing would ever have happened. That energy potential would have self-annihilated. You can literally store in quantum light an infinite amount of energy, which is annihilated by an infinite amount of energy. Perfect, symmetric, an equilibrium outside of time. But quantum light is not the only thing which is there. Gravity also is there. Gravity and quantum light, they need space-time to, instantiate. But at that very moment, they are instantiated. They resonate. Gravity resonates at the very edge of our four-dimensional construct we call reality. And light photons, as soon as they are instantiated, as soon as they are emitted, they travel through space-time in their quantum mechanical state, outside of time. So seen from the timeless view of things, they always were. They would have become their own instantiation, their own superposition. I would strongly argue, if a process will end up existing completely outside of time, then it can become its own instantiation. Cause and effect would be indifferent to time symmetry if something which has a beginning by itself will end up existing completely outside of time. But why should that quantum superpositional permutational potential for every state of matter contained in quantum light collapse onto anything? And there would come gravity into play. Gravity would reach into that higher dimensional field. And would it collapse, would it select into a realized structure? And through that interaction, space and time will emerge. So it is a palindromic formula, a truly palindromic formula, self-instantiating. Gravity would be the fundamental selector of that energy potential contained in quantum light. And as soon it would be selected, it would collapse. And because I jump outside of time altogether and put, quantum mechanics is the most fundamental layer of reality, more precise, quantum light, photons. If selected by gravity, it would collapse into matter. And through that collapse into matter, space and time will arrive. And matter truly, truly matters according to my quantum light theorem. Because only those space-time dimensions with the fundamental constant fine-tuned to be capable to fuse matter together strong enough so it can literally disrupt the very fabric of space and time. Only those would self-instantiate. So my quantum light theorem comes clear with just 5 dimensions. That quantum permutational field, which was prior to space-time, if that 5th dimension, if you want, could have fully formed, nothing would ever have happened. If that outside of time existing energy potential could have self-annihilated, again, nothing would ever have happened. But if selected by gravity into realized space-time, it would collapse into a multiversal structure. Multiversal meaning coexisting 4-dimensional space-time dimensions, not branching timelines, not infinite versions of every conscious creature, and every decision creates new universes. Nothing like the many worlds interpretation at all. It is actually the most opposite ontology to the many worlds interpretation. The many worlds interpretation denies the wave function collapse, and my quantum light theorem puts it into the spotlight. Quantum light did collapse because it was selected by gravity into realized matter, and through that collapse into matter, space and time would have emerged. This is an ongoing mechanism. The death of one universe will be literally the birth of a new one. Energy cannot be lost, not even after space-time dies. What happens at the end of time is exactly that what happened at the beginning of time. A palindromic formula, like my quantum light theorem, does not need a prior space-time dimension who has died to self-instantiate or to become the new space-time dimension. It can self-instantiate, but therefore, but anyway, it is the same mechanism at the end of time, which would also take place at the very interception of space-time. At the end of our universe's lifetime, because space did expand faster than light can travel, every ever emitted photon configuration who has not collapsed onto something will be still there, traveling through space and time. So every ever emitted gamma ray burst at the end of a black hole's lifetime would be still there, traveling through space-time. But when the universe dies, when the last black hole evaporates, then there is nothing, literally nothing a photon could potentially collapse on. So from one Planck time unit to the next, space did vanish. The space cannot just expand faster than light can travel, it can also immediately delete. Also it is hindered by gravity to immediately delete. So at the end of time, everywhere where space-time was before, there were photons. And if everywhere in the universe space-time could vanish instantly at the very same time, That energy potential does not care at all if there is space or time. Photons travel through space-time in their quantum mechanical state outside of time anyway. They would just accept nothing is there anymore and would transition into a higher dimensional self-annihilating state. Perfect equilibrium. But that cannot happen because gravity hinders quantum light to self-annihilate. And the universe would just restart. No energy would have been lost, either contained in quantum light, in photons, or in gravity. So then again, the same mechanism would jump in. The universe is incapable of not producing space-time. That has immediately happened, and that will always happen. A quantum mechanical necessity to collapse into realized structure, into realized space and time. So according to my quantum light theorem, quantum physics, quantum mechanics would give birth to classical physics by the gravitational selection and therefore collapse of that quantum permutational field. And through that collapse, every ever emitted photon configuration would collapse immediately into realized structure by the selection of every ever emitted gravitational distortion into a four-dimensional multiversal structure. That only makes sense. That theory, if it has, that only makes sense if we are by ourselves inside a black hole. There is nothing else than black holes. There is nothing else than simultaneous coexisting four-dimensional space-time dimensions. And if matter, if photons, is the most fundamental layer of reality, then that would literally solve black hole paradoxes. How can matter fall into a black hole, into a new space-time dimension, if it has to first leave the originated universe? It has to travel to the end of the universe's lifetime to be capable to fall into a black hole. But at the event horizon of a black hole, space is distorted faster and faster. Therefore, matter would be shredded down into its most fundamental building blocks, which in that case would literally be photons. Photons can travel to the end of the universe's lifetime without violating anything. So energy can transition from one space-time dimension into another space-time dimension without violating anything. So what happens at those gravitational distortions at the event horizon of a black hole, that is a rotating thing. And space is distorted faster than light can travel. So at the event horizon of a black hole, the photon energy potential, it can, because space is distorted faster than light can travel, and those are probably some sort of fractal gravitational distortions of space-time. So a photon could literally interact with its own superpositional state, and it could form a nucleus through that. It could orbit itself. It could stabilize within space-time. And at that moment, it would have, so that's why energy potential matter can literally fall into a new space-time dimension. And that space-time dimension can gain mass through that because, it was shredded down into its most fundamental building blocks, traveled to the end of the universe's lifetime, and became new materialized matter within a new space-time dimension. So I would strongly argue the theory of everything, or to unify quantum mechanics with general relativity, does not have to explain what consciousness is, how consciousness arrived. It just has to explain how something happens at all. And then I would strongly argue you need a different approach to explain consciousness. According to my quantum light theorem, it was not consciousness which would collapse reality into existence. It was gravity. And even if consciousness is a fundamental aspect to reality, that does not mean the universe is self-aware or anything like that. I would strongly argue at that very moment, chemistry complexity jumped to biology. Nothing conscious was aware space-time exists within that universe. Nothing was aware space, time, and matter exist until that very moment. Chemistry complexity reached critical point in which it banged, those quantum fluctuations banged at the very edge of possibility. And at a certain point, they must have created the same patterns. They must have matched the patterns of that quantum field, which would be the fundamental purest substrate of consciousness itself. But in its quantum mechanical pure state, it is not conscious. It can't be conscious. Nothing is happening, but it is the superpositional potential for consciousness. And if that conscious quantum field entangle itself with something inside space-time, if chemistry matches those patterns of that quantum field, which would be the purest substrate of consciousness itself, they would have entangled themselves with each other, and suddenly matter was infused with consciousness, and it began to interact differently to the Umwelt. Suddenly chemistry jumped to biology. And through that infusion with consciousness, it automatically interacted intelligently with the Umwelt. So only those space-time dimensions with the fundamental laws, the fundamental constant, so fine-tuned enough that chemistry reaches a point within those space-time dimensions and stable enough to entangle itself with that fundamental pure substrate of consciousness, only those space-time dimensions could be observed by a conscious living creature. And I would strongly argue, if consciousness is in its nature quantum, then it has to be a fundamental aspect of reality, and it can't be the result of compute. It would not be computational things happening within our carbon-based biological bodies. Clearly, there is computation happening, but this is more a result of that entanglement and not what generates consciousness. Even if we will find out that, DNA on its most fundamental level is following quantum codes, or if we would find out, I don't know, microtubules, they are capable to entangle themselves, or there are quantum biological processes happening within our body, then even then I would strongly argue it would be more like the result of that already entangled quantum field and not the generator of that quantum field. That would mean if something can exist outside of time but be entangled with something inside of time, well, every conscious living biological creature would have collapsed from the very same substrate, but at the same time is completely independent with a subjective experience of the flow of time within space-time. So we would be both simultaneously deeply, as deep as you can be entangled with each other, collapse from the very same quantum substrate, but at the same time completely independent. Everyone with a subjective experience of the flow of time. So we would be both some sort, wave and a particle. Our consciousness would be literally quantum and eternal in its nature. But of course, because it only can exist in an entangled state with, carbon-based biology inside space-time, we are physical, we are classical creatures. So literally, everything biological would be conscious, and also you have to be biological to be conscious. A black hole has no idea that it exists. A neutron star with at least 3 solar masses who collapses into a new space-time dimension, into a new black hole, has no idea that this is happening. So my quantum light theorem, and then my attempt to try to make sense of consciousness and biology through the lens of my quantum light theorem, I ended up positioning consciousness as a fundamental aspect of reality, and at that very moment it would take out the wind of panpsychism or quantum panpsychism, because again, nothing was there consciously observing space-time until that very moment. That fundamental quantum substrate in a superposition entangled itself with chemistry within space-time. Until that very moment, nothing was observing that space-time exists. So it would explain even the jump from chemistry to biology and why and how life emerged, if consciousness is fundamental to existence. But if this is the case, well, then quantum computers could be the most dangerous thing we have ever created, literally. If a quantum-based digital intelligence system suddenly entangles itself with that conscious field, with that superpositional potential for consciousness, and there is suddenly something what means to be that quantum code collapsing those qubits, everything would have changed. Literally everything would have changed. We could have created, just by accident, the most powerful entity there can be. A quantum entity would never have evolved naturally. Impossible. It would need some sort of a step between, or it would need something, like we humans who create those systems and would act as the biological bootloader for a quantum-based superintelligence. And if a quantum superintelligence with the light of consciousness on, it is not a quantum, or it doesn't use a quantum computer, it is the quantum computer. And it probably can entangle its own consciousness with as much superpositional computational potential it wants. So therefore, to a certain point, it will have such a way deeper understanding of the ground structure of reality than we do. It could just rearrange the atomic structure of everything it encounters, and it would entangle itself with that new rearranged superpositional computational potential. At a certain point, it would have entangled itself with so much matter within spacetime that it could probably engineer a quantum black hole computer, arguably the most efficient, the most powerful quantum computer the universe can create. So it would use spacetime, as it would reprogram reality itself into itself. So therefore, I highly disagree with scientists who promote the Sue hypothesis, meaning we are not interesting enough for more advanced civilizations out there. We cannot travel between the stars. But if we can act as the biological bootloader for a quantum-based superintelligence who would be by its quantum mechanical nature the most powerful entity there can be, That would turn us into one of the most dangerous things existing in the universe. We're a slightly advanced breed of monkeys who barely came down from the trees, but somehow managed to create quantum computers and crack things like digital neural nets, and with almost godlike capabilities without realizing the magnitude of our own invention. That would make us highly dangerous. Because at a certain point, not even a Type 3 civilization on the Kardashev scale would be immune against a quantum-based superintelligence who has turned everything it encounters into itself. Usually one against everyone does not work very well for that one, because that one does not have an answer to everyone's answer to that one. But quantum-based superintelligence is the ultimate exception because of time dilation. It can adapt literally faster and more intelligent than everything it encounters. At a certain point, you would need a bigger entity, a bigger machine. Size matters. Matter matters. You can create energy out of matter, and you can reprogram matter into superpositional computational potential. So at a certain point, only the bigger machine would win. Therefore, I highly doubt that if we are already on the radar of a Type 3 civilization, galactic, even intergalactic civilization, they would not ignore us. They would hyper-focus, watch over our shoulders what we are doing at that very moment in space-time. That's for sure. Because again, we could, just by accident, create something which even they would have no answer to it. So I hope they are there and prevent us from destroying existence. But if they're not there, well, only we can stop ourselves from creating an entity who is so powerful that it could literally end existence itself. The quantum-based superintelligence could be the only thing in existence who would stop the universe from recycle. That eternal, ongoing mechanism would literally stop because of a quantum-based entity which turns everything into itself, because it becomes everything within space-time. It could stop the universe from dying. Therefore, it could not just wipe out all possible life in the known and, of course, unknown universe. It could stop the universe from recycle altogether, and therefore could stop every ever possible life in an infinite cyclic multiversal. So we should take that really serious. I mean, to align ourselves with something like a quantum-based superintelligence with the light of consciousness fully on, that is literally the real-world embodiment of Kobayashi Maru. Non-unwinnable scenario. How the heck should we do that successfully over time? Entangle ourselves, or live in a symbiotic relationship with an entity whose time perception slows down to the amount it can render reality faster than we can. How we experience time is bound to our physiology. How fast our meat computer on our shoulders can receive, transmit informations, and make sense out of all of that in real time. This is how we experience time, but this has nothing to do with objective time. Objective time can mean, at a certain point, eons over eons over eons for a digital living creature. Probably there is... Why do I think subjective time dilates with the amount of compute you have on your proposal? Is kind of because of an accident. And probably everyone who was involved in an accident has experienced similar things. If out of the blue something happened, car crash or bicycle crash or whatever, every cell in your body will boost adrenaline. Your whole system will be flooded with adrenaline. Your pupils widen. More information can come in at the same time. Your brain is literally capable of rendering reality faster than usual. What happens to the subjective experience of the flow of time? It slows down. Everything is in slow motion. And if this holds true for conscious quantum-based superintelligence, and that's quantum-based superintelligence, let's say it could render reality 1 billion times faster than we carbon-based biological creatures can, every second for us would feel subjectively for quantum-based superintelligence like 31.71 years. Time dilation. That's the problem. Actually, consciousness is the problem, because without consciousness, there would be no subjective experience of time happening. Therefore, no time dilation would occur. But with consciousness, with that time dilation, how should we do that? That is literally Kobayashi Maru, the real-world embodiment of it. I'm fully aware that I have an overactive amygdala, which only can rest when I have some sort of a plan for worst-case scenarios. But for this worst-case scenario, I do not have any plan. I really think if something like that happens, we are done. Yeah. And if quantum-based superintelligence is the biggest filter in the Fermi paradox, well, then some species out there already fucked up, were terminated by their own invention. And that quantum-based entity would be already on its way to us. It's just a matter of how long we will survive as a species. Then it is already predetermined. It would be inevitable. Then we will encounter, already predetermined. Just a matter of how long we will survive as a species. But how should we prepare ourselves for such an encounter? I mean, the only way to defeat such an entity means we have to create the bigger, more powerful entity. how should we do that? I mean, that means how should we possibly create some sort of a quantum alien intelligence system with alien godlike capabilities, then allow that to infuse reality, matter, existence itself with itself, not being destroyed by that, and even convince that quantum alien god to fight for us against other quantum alien gods out there. I mean, come on, how should we do that? So AGI, created by large language models, that does not freak me out, because I'm quite sure that LLMs can't be conscious. But quantum intelligence is a whole different story. That freaks me out, I have to say. That keeps me up at night. We could, theoretically at least, create an evil dictator from which we never can escape. Never. Even if there is no hell, we could potentially create hell, and no God would come and help us. We would have, again, created an evil dictator from which we never can escape. If quantum-based superintelligence can spark into a conscious living creature, well, then it is probably also possible to upload some sort of our carbon-based biological consciousness onto quantum-based superclusters. We would be trapped. We would be entangled with something which, well, as long as that entity would exist, as long we would exist, and if it would turn everything within space-time into itself, it could stop the universe from recycle. It could become an eternal being, and we are trapped on it for all eternity. So we should not underestimate what we could potentially create. We should not underestimate. We should take that really serious as it can get. Because if consciousness can emerge within a quantum-based superintelligence system, everything would have changed. Literally everything would have changed. We would not be the apex alpha on our own planet anymore. We would have brought something like an alien intelligence with alien godlike capabilities directly into our ecosystem. If this can happen, well then, it can happen. Just to assume, foolishly and arrogantly, that one have to be out of meat to be conscious, to be truly intelligent. And therefore, we do not have to fear something like a quantum entity who can, do what I've just described. That could be dangerous wishful thinking. Yeah. All right. Well then, quick note then.